Hi, it's Steph, and I'm at the Home Depot, and it is the busiest flower shopping weekend of the year, Mother's Day weekend, and they are fully stocked with new perennials, trees, shrubs, and gorgeous annuals. So let's go ahead and take a look at the early May inventory at the Home Depot. Oh my goodness, look at this absolute beauty. This is mullein, also known as verbascum, and this is a plant that I have grown from seed before, but I have never seen it be sold as a plant here at the Home Depot, and here it is. This is a gorgeous plum shade variety. It has this beautiful purple pink coloration, and these have a tuft of foliage at the bottom, and then they send up these bloom stalks. So very similar in growth habit to things like foxgloves. And this variety is by Terra Nova Nurseries, being sold in the Vigoro container. It's called Sugar Plum, and look how beautiful that is. Now, I've grown a white variety from seed called Wedding Candles. It was a burpee pack of seeds, and I've also grown the Southern Charm, gorgeous. Now, this one here, the Verbascum Sugar Plum, it likes full sun. All of them like full sun and have low water needs, so they're pretty drought tolerant. Initially, you do have to water them until they're established and they start putting out some roots. It gets to be 18 inches in height, 12 inches in width, great for borders, and hardy down to negative 15 degrees Fahrenheit, hardy in zones 5 through 9. But this is a beautiful variety. And let's see, it is $10.98 in this Vigoro container. It is a perennial. I do find it to be a short-lived perennial, so it will come back in my garden for about 3 seasons, and then it will start getting smaller, but it does drop seed and it will start new plants for you. So you'll always have little babies kind of hanging around the main mother plant. But what a gorgeous variety. If you want a workhorse version of geranium that is perennial, this is the pick for you. This is the Roseanne geranium, and this is one that blooms non-stop all season long. One of the longest blooming perennials you'll find. And the Cranesbill Roseanne gets to be only 13 to 15 inches in height, needs 16 to 18 inch spacing, water when dry, and very hardy down to negative 30 degrees Fahrenheit. It says it blooms early to late summer, but it actually starts in early summer, and you will continue to get reblooming through the fall. Has a really pretty light lavender color and tons of buds. Also really attractive foliage. And if you've ever wanted your own field of lavender, here's your chance. This is a Vigoro lavender on sale currently, 2 for $12 here at my Home Depot, and it smells amazing. Now, not only is lavender beautiful with these purple blooms and silvery green foliage with a hint of blue, but the pollinators also love them. Now, in order for lavender to grow best, it does need a very well-draining soil in a full sun location. If you have too much moisture in the soil, they can sometimes rot at the crown and not do as well. And when they're done blooming, to deadhead them for the season, you want to cut them down to just a couple of inches above the base and give them a haircut, and then they'll reflush out with new growth. It's actually really important to cut back lavender because it is a perennial that can get quite woody, and over time you'll end up with a very woody base and less foliage and blooms. And this English lavender, Lavandula augustifolia, Lebanese Silver Forever, has a shrubby growth habit, gets to be 12 to 24 inches in height, needs 18-inch spacing, water when dry, and hardy down to negative 20 degrees Fahrenheit. And it blooms early to late summer. And some Coreopsis or tickseed. Now, this is a perennial with some serious flower power. And these really roughly varieties are really beautiful. They remind me very much of a marigold, and also like a Cosmo, because Cosmos, which are an annual, get these tall stems with these little button blooms, and so that reminds me of a Cosmo, and the bloom reminds me of a marigold. But look how many buds are on this plant, an incredible amount of buds. So it blooms for a really long time. It's always putting out new flowers. And this variety is in the Home Depot 2-gallon colorful containers for $14.98. It is called the Moon Swirl Tickseed, Coreopsis grandiflora. It gets to be 18 to 24 inches in height, needs 12 to 18 inch spacing, water when dry, and hardy down to negative 30 degrees Fahrenheit. And it says that it blooms early summer through fall. This is also a super easy plant to divide. You can see that this is pretty large, so you could take this home right out of the container, divide it into 2, maybe even 3 plants. Just keep those divisions well watered until they start establishing some roots. But a really great perennial for the garden. Another beauty, Beardtongue, also known as penstemon, and this has the most perfect bell-shaped bloom that the pollinators absolutely love. They come in lots of different varieties and colors. I have one called Midnight Masquerade. There's also one called Dark Towers, and those two varieties have dark foliage with a light pink bloom. They almost have a hint of purple and white to them, but this variety has a green foliage and a really pretty kind of rose pink bloom, and it is called the Beardtongue or penstemon Mission Bells Deep Rose. Gets to be 20 to 24 inches in height, 18 to 20 inches wide, water when dry, hardy down to -20 degrees Fahrenheit, and it blooms early summer through fall. I do find that some varieties get quite tall and could benefit from a little bit of staking so that they don't flop over, but these absolutely do wonderful in a full sun area, and you'll have pollinators visiting nonstop. And look at this, they actually had a couple of the Dark Towers variety right on the side, so you can see the difference between the one that we just looked at, the Mission Bells, which has the green foliage, and the Dark Towers, which has a larger foliage in this deep burgundy coloration. And here's the difference in blooms. This is the Dark Towers. You can see what I mean by like that purple pink, and then the tips kind of look white, but really pretty. Even after these are done blooming and they start to dry out, they have really beautiful seed pods that look great in a cut flower arrangement. Now the Dark Towers variety does get a little bit taller, 32 to 36 inches, which makes sense because I have the Midnight Masquerade with the dark foliage, and I do have to stake mine in order to keep it nice and upright. And also hardy down to -40 degrees Fahrenheit, which is quite a bit hardier than the Mission Bells, which is only down to -20 degrees Fahrenheit, blooms midsummer. But really beautiful dark foliage on this variety. And dead nettle, which makes an excellent ground cover, but also a wonderful perennial to use in containers. Look at this beautiful silvery foliage. It adds a lot of color to a part shade, shady spot, and it's also known as Allium. And this dead nettle variety is Orchid Frost. It likes part sun. It is deer resistant. However, I do find that sometimes bunnies will eat the foliage. It's a decorative ground cover, blooms early to late summer, gets to be 8 to 12 inches in height, needs 6 to 10 inch spacing, but it will continue to spread horizontally to form a wonderful ground cover as time goes on. Very hardy down to -30 degrees Fahrenheit, and super easy to divide. All you have to do is yank a piece out of the soil and plant it, and it'll start growing new roots, and you'll have a whole new plant. And a gorgeous variety of garden phlox. This one is by Proven Winners, and it is called the Cloudburst phlox. It wants full sun. It gets to be 28 inches tall, and it spreads quite a bit. It says to give it 42-inch spacing. Now, that is one thing you really should pay attention to when it comes to phlox is proper spacing, because most varieties, especially older varieties, not so much these newer ones that have been bred against powdery mildew, but if you don't give them proper airflow and spacing, they can sometimes get this powdery look to the foliage, which is called powdery mildew. And so what you would have to do is cut down that foliage, get rid of it, and sometimes you can even treat the plant with like a baking soda mixture or even neem oil, and you can look that up, but that is the most common thing that affects phlox. So proper spacing usually helps prevent it. And it blooms in early summer through late summer. It likes full sun. Most phloxes, with the exception of things like creeping phlox or woodland phlox, are going to want a full sun location, a well-draining soil, and they're such a beautiful staple perennial for your borders. They also come in lots of different colors and different heights. And these Proven Winners containers, I believe, are $12.98. Yes, $12.98 for the 2.5 quart size containers of Proven Winners perennials. And a perennial that I absolutely love in my garden, it is Allium. Now, these are not the Allium bulbs that you plant in the fall that bloom in the spring. These are the clumping perennial type Alliums that give you these beautiful ball or sphere shaped blooms later in the summer. And this variety is a really popular one called Serendipity by Proven Winners. It wants full sun or even part sun, gets to be 15 to 20 inches in height, and it needs about 10 to 15-inch spacing. Super easy to divide if they start getting large in your garden. Typically around year 3, perennials are large enough to be able to divide and spread around. They look really beautiful in drifts or in groups, especially along the front of a border because they're really short. And the pollinators absolutely love them. They are a bee magnet all season long when they're in bloom. And they bloom mid to late summer. So it's great to add plants that bloom at different times so that you get successions of blooms, which means that you don't just have a spring or a summer garden garden. You have a garden that you can carry from spring all the way through fall with different flowers or perennials coming into bloom at different times. Not only does the allium have a really beautiful bloom, but even the foliage is really attractive. It has this kind of silvery blue coloring to them, and it looks like a clump of ornamental grass when it's not in bloom, and it's a really nice tidy clump. So the Allium Serendipity 2.5 quart Proven Winners container, $12.98. And some Nepeta, also known as catmint, and this is the variety that I have growing all along my front borders. It is the Cat's Pajamas Nepeta, and it's a more compact, lower growing variety of Nepeta. Now, if you're familiar with the traditional Walker's Low, it can spread quite wide and get quite large. So if you have a smaller garden or just want a more compact version, this is a great option. So the Cat's Pajamas Nepeta only gets to be 12 to 14 inches in height. They do like full sun. All Nepetas, similar to salvia, as they all want full sun, and it needs about 18 to 20 inch spacing. It is hardy in zones 3 through 8 or down to negative 40 degrees Fahrenheit, and it blooms late spring into early fall. Now you can deadhead it as the season goes on, which means just cutting off the spent blooms, just shear it back and it will reflush with more blooms. And another one that the pollinators love, and because it has what I find to be a very pleasant minty fragrance, the deer and rabbit don't like it, so they stay away from it. So a great perennial, and a really pretty white spike type perennial that I've been after for a little while now. It is the Proven Winners Magic Show White Wands Veronica, and I just found it today here at the Home Depot, so I'm going to grab a couple. And this variety is pretty compact, getting to be only 14 to 16 inches in height, but it blooms for a long time. And look at that. These spike type perennials provide such beautiful vertical interest and contrast with other perennials in the garden. So 14 to 16 inches in height, and needs 16 to 20 inch spacing. Hardy in zones 4 through 8 or down to negative 30 degrees Fahrenheit, and it blooms early summer through midsummer. It wants full sun to part sun, and that is really pretty. And an excellent plant for a part shade location that a viewer actually told me recently in the comments that they were on the hunt for, Chantilly Lace Aruncus. It is a more compact version of goatsbeard, which can get quite large. So if you have a smaller garden and you want to grow that plant, this is a great option. So the Chantilly Lace Aruncus by Proven Winners gets to be 30 to 32 inches in height, and it spreads about 40 inches in diameter up to 48 inches. So this is what I like to call a specimen perennial. You can plant this as a single or standalone plant and underplant it in front with like a drift of shorter perennials in groups of 3 and 5, and this would look beautiful, especially paired with things like a foliage plant like heucheras. That could look really pretty. They get these bloom spikes that are like a plume type of bloom that look very similar to a stilbea. You can see it here in the photo. I've had mine, this is the 3rd season, and it's putting on a really great size clump of foliage, so I cannot wait to see it bloom this year. And it is hardy in zones 3 through 7 or down to negative 40 degrees Fahrenheit. It blooms early summer through midsummer, and it likes sun to shade. I would say a couple of hours of morning sun at best and afternoon shade. And it's also a plant that likes a moist but well draining soil. And in the 2.5 quart container, $12.98. Even the foliage is really pretty on Aruncus. It has this fern-like texture, and look at it paired with this heuchera right beside it. This is the Dolce Toffee Tart by Proven Winners, and this orange kind of coloring with these plumes that pick up on that same coloration. Gorgeous pairing right here. I actually love pairing plants. I think it's such a fun way to be creative in the garden. And the Proven Winners Dolce Toffee Tart heuchera gets to be 8 to 10 inches in height. It will get a little bit taller when it puts on its bloom spikes, which heuchera does bloom. You can actually see one right here. It looks like plumes of baby's breath. And this variety gets to be 16 to 18 inches in width, hardy in zones 4 through 9 or down to negative 30 degrees Fahrenheit. And it wants to be planted in part shade to shade. And we've talked about this recently, but Home Depot is carrying these quart-size containers of Proven Winners plants for $7.98, which is an excellent price point, especially if you want to buy multiples, and a good way to test them. Also, the smaller root ball makes them a lot easier to plant. It seems like the pink version of the Magic Show Pink Potion Veronica is popular because they're down to only 3 plants, where they had about 4 of these racks on the other side of the white. So the Magic Show Pink Potion also gets to be 14 to 16 inches in height and needs 18 to 22 inch spacing. Hardy in zones 4 through 8, blooms early summer through midsummer. Now you can see on these Proven Winners tags that there's a section that says pair with, and it will give you plant pairing suggestions, similar to how you pair cheeses and wines. So it says that you can pair this Veronica with Shasta daisies, red switchgrass, baby's breath or gypsophilia, perennial salvia, coral bells, and bee balm. So I always think that's a really great option, because if you're someone who maybe isn't sure what you should pair your plants with, there are always some suggestions on the Proven Winners tags. And some Centaurea, also known as mountain bluet. Now this variety is called Amethyst in Snow, and while it is really pretty and interesting, I have not found this variety to be as hardy as the straight purple blue colored ones. I feel like those do a lot better, they're hardier, and they come back more consistently. Now these are really interesting flowers. So not only does the bloom look like a little spider flower, but even the bloom buds look like little pineapples to me. Look at that. So it is a really pretty plant, and I was quite disappointed that my Amethyst in Snow didn't return, but let me know if you've had better luck with it, because it is beautiful. Compact variety. It says that it is deer resistant, outstanding color, likes full sun. It gets to be 14 inches in height, needs 28 inch spacing, and hardy down to negative 40 degrees Fahrenheit. Blooming late spring through summer. And a really popular variety of salvia, the caradonna. It has these really pretty characteristic red stems, and these are in a 2-gallon container here at the Home Depot for $19.98. They're actually 3-gallon containers. 18 to 24 inches in height, need 12 inch spacing, water when dry, hardy down to negative 30 degrees Fahrenheit, and they bloom early to late summer. Now these large containers for $19.98 are great candidates for division right out of the container. So when you get these home, if you wanted to, you can split these up into about 3 plants, bringing the cost per plant a lot lower. Just make sure to keep those transplants well watered until they establish some roots. Salvias are excellent plants. The deer and rabbit stay away from them, and the pollinators love them. Plus they provide a lot of vertical interest in the garden, and most varieties bloom usually in spring. You can get a secondary bloom flush out of them by deadheading them, but they work so well as a companion plant to things like roses and peonies. And there are some really pretty options of the drop and decorate containers. I'm guessing in time for Mother's Day. Some pretty ones. Look at this. So this is like a double begonia. There is also a polka dot plant, a fern, a trailer, which looks to be some kind of vinca. These are gorgeous. They look like roses, so pretty. And these are only $24.98, which is an excellent price point for the amount of plants that you get in the container. And what's great about these is they've already done the work of combining the plants for you. You just take it home, put it in your 12-inch container. This will fit anywhere from a 12 to 14 inch, and it will look beautiful right off the bat. They also have some with orange and red and some yellow of those double begonias, really pretty. Some more of these gorgeous begonias in this hanging basket, $34.98, in this really pretty shade of rose pink. They also have this kind of orange red color up top, and the most beautiful apricot orange color down below. These are so eye-catching. Such beautiful hanging baskets. Some zonal geraniums, which are an annual. Some people do overwinter them. Now it does say full sun, but in my experience, geraniums do better with maybe a morning sun and afternoon shade during the hottest part of the day. But they also have really pretty foliage, and this red is so vibrant, they almost look like velvet. Really pretty. And they've been marked down from $9.98 to $7.98, which is a great price. Some of the big leaf begonia hanging baskets for $19.98, and I've really taken a liking to these in the last several years. Look how beautiful this foliage is. It's so large and shiny, and then you get these little dangly blooms that look like little earrings off of the plant. Really pretty. And between Mother's Day and Memorial Day, it's a great time to start putting together those summer annual containers. And during my last trip to Home Depot, I actually purchased one of these 1-gallon alocasia plants from Proven Winners. I purchased this dark foliage one at the bottom here, very similar to coffee cups, might actually even be the name of it. But I thought it would look really pretty planted with some yellow dipladenia that I purchased over at Lowe's a few weeks back. But they also have the canna lilies with really beautiful foliage. These look gorgeous on a patio deck or even by a pool. Very tropical vibe to them, underplanted with some other plants. Really pretty. $10.98 for these canna lilies. They have cordyline spikes, which I really enjoy using as a centerpiece to a container. I have used these for years in my window boxes, underplanted with mandevilla and dipladenia, and they look really pretty. The quart size is $7.98, and then they also have the gallon size right behind me for $9.98. And some really interesting petunia hanging baskets. These have that sort of speckled or like tie-dye effect to them, and these are $16.98, and it looks like a 1.5 gallon hanging basket. They also have a sale on the number 8 size of the drop and decorate planters with a combination of verbenas and petunias. So just take these home, drop them into your 8 to 10 inch planters, and you are good to go for the season. Some bleeding hearts. If you don't have any in your garden, this is a beautiful spring blooming perennial for a part shade to shade garden, but I've also seen them do really well in a sunny spot. So I think if they get enough water, they do well in sun as well. And they have the most beautiful little heart-shaped blooms that then open up to this little droplet that makes them look like a bleeding heart. The foliage is also really beautiful, and these are another one of those perennials that I like to call these standalone or specimen perennials, because over time they can get 30 to 36 inches in height and in width, so they look really well just as one plant that gets really large with all of these little pendulous heart-shaped blooms on the ends. These are in the Vigoro container for $10.98, and they're really hardy, down to -50 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, once the weather starts getting warmer, they will die all the way back in summertime, and then they will pop back up next spring. And some calla lilies, which are different than the canna lilies. So the cannas have those large tropical leaves with the very tall blooms. And these are a more compact version of lily, the calla lily. Now these here in my zone 6B, 7A are considered an annual. However, I have gardening friends who have planted them in a microclimate, a more protected space, either along the foundation of their house, a south side facing wall, and protected them from winter winds, maybe with some mulching, and they've returned for them for a few years. So it's possible that depending on how happy they are in your garden, they'll return. And these are $19.98, a plant that would make a wonderful gift for Mother's Day. And another option for shade, hosta. These plants just keep on giving. They're excellent plants for divisions. They are beautiful to offer a lot of color in a shady spot because they come in so many different patterns and colorways. You will see them in multiple shades of green, cream, yellow, and even blues. And some large, some small. So there are hostas that fit every size garden and aesthetic. But really pretty varieties here. They have the hosta franci, which is this one here, which is a perennial for shade. One thing I will say about hosta is that they can sometimes be susceptible to slugs, which you will start noticing some holes being eaten through the leaves, and then you know you're dealing with slugs. So you could put down some sluggo pellets so that they can eat them and then they go away. You could also make bear traps for them, is another option. See this right here? This is what slug damage looks like. So it looks like some of these have been attacked by slugs. So something to be aware of. And also hostas are like deer salad. So if you bring hostas home and you deal with deer, just know that you will have to spray them to protect them from getting eaten. Hostas are also super hardy. So this Franci variety is hardy down to -40 degrees Fahrenheit. And then they also have this Night Before Christmas variety, which is a green with a cream stripe in the center. And it is also hardy down to -40 degrees Fahrenheit. Some hydrangeas. This beautiful dark foliage one is the Eclipse hydrangea by First Editions. I actually bought one last year in the fall when they were marked down 50% off, and I'm very excited to see what it does in my garden. So this is a unique variety of hydrangea because it has this really deep dark foliage, and the blooms are like a rose color. So let me show you the tag here. There it is. It is a mophead or a macrophylla type hydrangea, which means that it typically blooms on old wood. So you would want to prune these if you want to, is right after they're done blooming and the flowers start to fade. And this one here is pretty compact, getting to be 3 to 5 feet tall and wide, and it is hardy in zones 5 through 9. This variety also wants to be planted in part shade. If it does get sun, a few hours of morning sun, about 4 hours or so of morning sun is sufficient, and it has high water needs because it is a hydrangea. So hydra likes water. So a moist but well draining soil. And these number 2 containers of First Editions Eclipse hydrangeas are $29.98. Another exciting find new here at the Home Depot this year is the Pinky Winky Prime. So the Pinky Winky is a beautiful large panicle hydrangea that has a cone-shaped bloom that kind of goes through a gradient or ombre color effect. You can see that here in the photo. It goes from like this dark rosy pink to a lighter pink to almost white with a hint of pink. Really beautiful. And the panicles are so large. Look at that. Isn't that stunning? So this is an improved variety over the traditional Pinky Winky, and it has large flowers, cold hardy, vibrant color, great for cut flowers, hardy in zones 3 through 8 or down to negative 40 degrees Fahrenheit. Such a beautiful panicle hydrangea. Now panicle hydrangeas are great because they can tolerate more sun, which means if you wanted to grow hydrangeas but you had more sun and the macrophylla like more shade, the panicle is a good option for you. They also bloom on new wood, which means that you don't have to worry about the buds getting zapped by a late spring frost or pruning them at the incorrect time. And if you are shopping for Mother's Day, a beautiful hanging basket with annuals is great, but so is a plant or shrub with roots because they can plant them and think of you every year. And this is a great option, the Encore Azalea. Now azaleas are spring blooming plants, and the older fashioned varieties of azaleas only bloom in the spring and then they're done. The great thing about the Encore Azaleas is that they will continue to sporadically bloom throughout the whole season. So you get a big flush in spring, a bigger flush in fall, and then you'll get some sporadic reblooming between the end of spring and beginning of fall. So this one here, the Encore Autumn Carnation, has a rose-colored bloom. And this was the first iteration of a reblooming azalea, and now there are a few others on the market. But it gets to be an average of 4.5 feet in height, 4 feet in width, and it has pink blooms, hardy in zones 6 through 10. And it likes a well-drained, slightly acidic soil. These Encore Azaleas are in a number 1 or 1 gallon container for $19.98. I also found the Encore Azalea in the color Autumn Twist, which has a really pretty light pink with some darker pink speckling in the center. And some really fun evergreens or conifers for your garden to add some beautiful winter green interest. Now I live here in the Northeast, we get cold winters, so having evergreens is really important to have some structure and interest in the garden while all of my perennials are dormant. And these are some fun topiaries. So for $129, these look like they're made of junipers, which means they would be drought tolerant and deer resistant. But you have these swirly ones here, the cloud pruned one, and even the 3-ball topiary style. They still have lots of flowering trees available here at my Home Depot, and these crab apples are currently in bloom and look gorgeous. Now I don't have a crab apple in my garden yet, but I hope to add one. Look at these beautiful blooms. Even the buds are so pretty. And then later in the season, when they're done blooming, they will leaf out and be just foliage, and then they will put on these little crab apples that the birds absolutely love. There are 2 varieties of crab apples that you can get, a persistent one which holds on to its fruit a little bit better, and a non-persistent variety which can be a little messy and drop all of those crab apples. But this is a really beautiful spring blooming tree that also has great fruit for the pollinators. Crab apples are a medium-sized tree, getting to be anywhere from 15 to 20 feet tall and wide, and they're hardy down to negative 30 degrees Fahrenheit. Another really pretty spring flowering tree, the dogwood, and this variety is the Cornus Cherokee Brave in a shade of white. Now, dogwoods are exceptionally hardy trees. They're hardy in zones 5 through 8, and they prefer a moist but well-draining soil, and they also do well as a part shade tree. So they like to be grown under the canopy of larger shade trees. So if you have them in morning sun, afternoon shade, they will do best. And this one has a really pretty kind of creamy white bloom. I love dogwoods. I have about 3 of them in my garden, a pink one and 2 white ones. One of them even has variegated foliage. Just a really pretty spring tree. And the dogwood is $79.98. When you go out to the nurseries this weekend, you might be tempted to pick up one of these florist hydrangeas. These have been forced to grow in time for Easter and Mother's Day, and they'll typically be around the same price, so $24.98, around the same price that you can buy other hydrangeas for that will be more reliably blooming in your garden in the years to come. Now these here, if you plant them in the garden, you can see that they have beautiful blooms on them right now, but if you plant them in the garden, chances are in subsequent years you will just get foliage out of them. Instead, take take those same $25, sometimes even a little bit cheaper, and purchase one of these hydrangeas that have the same type of blooms. These are the macrophylla or the big leaf type hydrangeas. These are the endless summer, and they are, let's see, $21.98. This bloomstruck is actually a beautiful variety. It has these red stems, and then you'll get these large clusters of blooms, just like the one I showed you. And they like to be planted in an acidic soil in order to have the more blue coloration. So the acidity in your soil is what determines the color of the blooms. If you have more acid, they will be more blue, and if you have more alkaline soil, they will be more purple pink. This bloomstruck is a really gorgeous one. It gets to be 3 to 4 feet in height, 4 to 5 feet in width, hardy in zones 4 through 9. So these are a much better buy than these that are in full bloom, these florist hydrangeas. Skip these, buy those. Peonies also make an excellent gift for Mother's Day, and these here are only $19.98, and they have some buds on them, which means they're getting ready to bloom this season. Now, some people start to get nervous when they see ants on the heads or the bloom buds of their peonies, but that's perfectly normal. It's actually part of the process. When you see those ants, they're just feeding on that nectar, and shortly thereafter, your peony will bloom. The thing that you should know about peonies, this specific variety, these are herbaceous peonies, which means that the blooms are really heavy, but the foliage can get quite tall. So you should stake them to offer some support, because if it gets a little windy or it rains, sometimes they can flop to the ground, and now you won't really enjoy your flowers. And the other thing is, when you bring these home, you don't want to plant them too deep, because if you plant the crown too deep, you might not get as much blooms. But they're very hardy plants. They actually last for a really long time, upwards of 50 years in some people's gardens. They're what they call those heirloom plants, and very hardy, down to negative 40 degrees Fahrenheit. Beautiful spring bloomer, $19.98 for these, and they bloom best in full sun. And some Baptisia, and this is a beautiful variety. I actually have it in my own garden. It is called the Decadence Deluxe Pink Lemonade. It has yellow with a hint of pink to it. Really pretty. They like full sun. They can take part sun. They get to be 42 to 48 inches in height, and they need about 48-inch spacing. Another one of those specimen or standalone perennials that you can plant on its own. This one actually acts like a shrub, similar to like the hibiscus that we see in the summer, the hardy hibiscus. Those are plants that get large enough to be a standalone, that look like a shrub but are actually a perennial. And this one here is hardy in zones 4 through 9 or down to negative 30 degrees Fahrenheit. So Baptisia, false indigo, same thing. They are very hardy plants. And the great thing about them is that I don't really find that they're a very long blooming perennial, but the foliage is really pretty. It has like this greenish blue tone to it that looks really pretty when you cut them to add into cut flower arrangements. So even the foliage is a reason enough to grow it. And these are $24.98 for the Proven Winners Baptisia in a number 3 container. And check out this gorgeous Baptisia. Isn't that stunning? It almost looks like in person, like the bloom is brown and the inside is yellow. Very different and unique. It has that same kind of blue-green foliage, and it's also a Proven Winners plant. It's called the Decadence Cherries Jubilee. It also wants a full sun, 30 to 36 inches in height, so this one's slightly more compact than the Decadence Lemonade that we just looked at, and gets to be about 36 inches in diameter. Hardy in zones 4 through 9 or down to negative 25 degrees Fahrenheit. And it likes full sun to part sun. Look at this beauty. It's a clematis or clematis, depending on how you pronounce it. And this one's in full bloom. It's $14.98 in these containers, with like the bare root containers that you find sometimes here at the box store. And the variety is called Bees Jubilee. Look at that, a climbing clematis. Now, clematis like to be grown with their feet in the shade and their head in the sun in order for you to get the best blooms out of it. They also are grown in 3 different groups, group 1, 2, and 3, and it's important to know which group your clematis is so that you know when to appropriately prune it. And this one has a really pretty bloom. Look at that. $14.98. They have lots and lots of the quart-size Vigoro, New Guinea Impatiens in several beautiful colors. I love this orange color. So pretty. Fuchsia, rose pink, and even this one that looks like it's a pink and purple striped. $4.98 here at the Home Depot. So if you garden in the shade or you want some annuals for a shady container, New Guinea impatiens are a great option. And some beautiful and colorful drop-in decorates in the 12-inch size, and they've combined some proven winners plants in these. Some beautiful combinations of petunias and calibrachoa. Look at this one here with some verbena and the Bordeaux petunia, as well as the yellow calibrachoa or superbell. Really pretty. And these are $24.98, which is actually a pretty great price for this size container that's already so full. This is a really pretty osteospermum. We saw it in the Bright Lights purple, the Bright Lights sunset, and now this is the Bright Lights pink in this really pretty light pink coloring. And it's in a number 1 container by Proven Winners for $9.98. Osteospermum is an annual, and I do find that it performs better in spring and in late summer heading into fall. Sometimes in the height of the summer, it will peter out a little bit and start reloading buds for when the temperature cools off. This is another really beautiful one. This is in a Home Depot house brand container for $16.98. Real pretty with that purple eye and that yellow coloring. Another really cheery and colorful annual is the Gerber daisy, and they have these here in shades of yellow and some darker pink and lighter pink, as well as orange, and they're by the Easy Daisy brand for $10.98. They also have these really pretty containers of annuals that are already all planted up for you. They're called the Farmhouse Deck Planter, and you can see that they have some grass in the center. They also have some pentas and some euphorbia, as well as some verbena and even some petunias. And these are $39.98. Well, that brings us to the end of checking out the Mother's Day weekend inventory here at the Home Depot Garden Center for the first week of May. I hope that you've enjoyed checking out what my store has in stock, and I hope that you can find some of these varieties near you. Thank you so much for spending your time with me, and I'll catch you in the next one.